discipline to get prepared. And so now we have him back. That was a little over a year ago. And so we have Jon Guerrera, who is an account strategist at Google right now, talking about gamifying the job search process and self-improvement 1 year later. Please give him a round of applause.
Hello, everybody. How are you all today?
Good.
Good, thank you. Do I have this? Okay, so I'm Jon Guerrera. It's awesome to be here, and I'm especially excited to be talking about something I'm sure we all know and love. It's a little different than what we've heard about today, but it's nothing other than preparing for a job interview. Like many goals in our lives, the job search is not particularly fun nor easy, but it's incredibly important to our careers and our lives as a whole. As such, those who can find the motivation, the discipline to work through these kinds of challenging goals are those that usually end up achieving for more or less epic wins in their lives. So I'm just going to talk to you today about how gamification can be really good for helping you do just that, finding the motivation to achieve epic wins in your life. And again, we're going to be looking at that through the lens of gamification. As a bit of background, I talked about this a little bit at last year's GSummit, how gamification can be used for longer-term goals like building work ethic, if anyone saw the speech last year, writing a speech, and even managing more complex goals. And these systems are fantastic, but they're most effective when you have the time to build sustainable habits through them. But as I'm sure many of you know, quite a few life-changing opportunities don't really give you the luxury of taking things slow or building habits. So more extreme measures are often required to fully take advantage of them. To that point, it was an opportunity to interview with Google on really short notice that finally prompted me to see if I could update the system to be just as applicable to short-term, high-pressure goals as the longer-term ones. And it's that update that I'll actually be sharing with you today over the next few minutes. Just keep in mind that while this talk will be from the perspective of someone preparing for a job interview, these takeaways can be applied to anything of a short-term, high-pressure nature. So if you have any goals in mind, take note, and I'm pretty sure it would apply for your particular situation as well. So with that in mind, let's just jump right into it and take a look at how the system works. So I was a little bit more methodical than this picture might imply, but essentially the goal of this update to this goal gamification system was to hit every motivational trigger I could find over the few days I had to prepare for this interview in kind of a hurry. Here's what that looks like in theory. Just take a second to look at that. And don't worry, I'll walk through all of this. Here's what it looks like in practice. I'm a big fan of Post-it notes. If anyone's ever seen me speak last year, I'm all about Post-it notes, and you'll see that as a theme throughout the talk. But this is a lot to look at in 5 seconds, so let's just break it down step by step, and I'll explain to you how the system works. So step 1 here is what I just call goal, milestone, reward combination. It's pretty straightforward. You set up a goal. In this case, the goal is to be 100% prepared for the job interview as measured by how many hours I spent preparing. So once I had that goal in mind and how I wanted to measure it, I broke it down into milestones, just something more achievable that I could focus on. So I set a milestone at the first hour of preparation, the 5th hour, and then again at the 10th hour. And I'm a big fan of progressive difficulty, so start easy and ramp up over time rather than starting with an aggressive first milestone, which I think is actually demotivating. But that's just me in my experience. And then from there, you just attach rewards to the milestones based on the perceived difficulty. So I don't know if you can read it, but yeah, I can't really. So the rewards I set were pretty simple. For the first hour, it's an easy milestone to hit. I gave myself 2 energy drinks for that. The next one, a case of what's called green tea sencha shots. They're my favorite beverage. They're a little pricey. It's a more substantial reward for that second milestone. Then the final one, I earned a trip to my favorite retailer just to buy some new clothes, about a few $100s in value. So those are some very basic rewards I attached there, and that's just the foundation of the system. That could stand alone on its own as a way to just keep track of a goal you're working on. But again, for short-term high pressure, I don't think it cuts it. So it's really the step 2, all of this, that the major updates to the system came in for this purpose, for this interview, through what I like to call plugins. And plugins is just what I refer to as optional game mechanics that can be thought of as a turbocharge to the system. So the higher the demands of the goal, the more plugins you'd want to consider adding, especially for these short-term one-off projects where intrinsic motivation and long-term passion and cultivating that is not really as much of a concern. So I have a few such plugins at the moment that I'm a big fan of that I use for different contexts, and in the interest of time, I'll review the 3 that I found to be by far the most effective. So the first one is actually 2 of these Post-it notes. It's a reduced commitment streak bonus. Now that's kind of a mouthful, so I'll take a step back. The purpose of this particular plugin is to kill procrastination and just keep you in a state of action when you should be working. The way it works, streak bonus, pretty self-explanatory. In this case, I had 10 days, and I wanted to be working every single day, regardless of how late I was at work, whether I had plans on the weekends. I wanted to get work done and prepare for this every single day. And if I was successful and didn't break the streak, I would earn the reward on the bottom of the Post-it note, which is buying an item on thinkgeek.com, which is a website I like to go about frequently. Now, the reduced commitment is something that's a bit counterintuitive, so I'll explain what that means. So in the past, when I wanted to do a streak bonus, I figured I would let the streak motivate me to be consistent, and in order to hit the streak every day, I'd require maybe an hour, hour and a half before it's considered a successful day. That actually backfires very frequently, especially imagine you get home, it's 10:30 p.m. on a Monday, and you just feel awful. You just want to go to bed, but you promised yourself you'd be consistent every single day. An hour and a half is incredibly daunting, especially when it's 10:30 and you have 1,000,001 other things to do and you just want to go to bed. So it's very easy to procrastinate, persuade yourself you'll do it tomorrow, and let's be real, that doesn't really happen that way. So I reduced the commitment significantly. I told myself it would be a successful day if I just worked on this for 15 minutes. And that seems really low, but what almost always ended up happening is you feel a lot of resistance before you actually start, especially when you're tired, you've already had a full day at work. But by the time you sit down and that 15 minutes, it's not a lot, you figure you'll just do the 15 minutes bare minimum, go to sleep. You just sit down and just want to get it done, get it out of the way. What almost always happens is you ease into the work, it becomes a little easier, you remember what you were working on last time you were sitting down working on this, and you get into a state of flow. You get into the zone, you start getting some ideas in the works, you do a mock interview, you think of a better way to restate an interview question, things like that would pop into my head. And next thing I knew, I calculated this on average, that 15-minute commitment got me about 30, 35 minutes of work per night, whereas I actually didn't even know if I had the time to do it to begin with. So this plugin was really effective at just killing procrastination before it could even start. I mean, 15 minutes is just such a low amount. Even if I got home at 11, I would just sit down and just try and do it and get it out of the way. And more often than not, I got into a state of flow, and I actually ended up working longer than I thought it would. So that's the first plugin, and I use this now very frequently. Second plugin, pretty straightforward. It's variable rewards, and the way it works is for every hour that I put into preparing for the interview, whether it was mock interviews, speaking with people who may have worked at Google in the past or had succeeded in the interview and now work there, for every hour, I would get to flip 2 coins. If both coins landed on heads, so a 1 in 4 chance, I would earn the reward specified all the way on the right. And I just happened to use energy drinks because I didn't have time to think of any creative rewards. I love Red Bulls, and I don't get to drink them normally, so it was a great reward for that. Okay, so variable rewards, that was a fantastic way to just push myself a little harder every single day. So hypothetically, if I had worked 2 hours and 40 minutes, and this did happen every so often, I would gladly work that extra 20 minutes to get to an even 3 hours, and then have a third coin flip to look forward to at the end of the work session. It was very motivating, it was fun and enjoyable to actually have something to look forward to after a brutal 3 hours of work, after work, and I found it to be very successful, especially for short-term one-off projects. I just want to put a caveat in there. If you are working on something that you're intrinsically motivated to do already, you're passionate about it, it's a long-term project, I'd be pretty careful about just throwing variable rewards in there with no discretion. This is best designed for short-term projects that you need to put in a lot of effort in now because soon that opportunity may not exist anymore. And finally, the last plugin here is what I made this term up. It's low energy progress enabling, or LEAP for short. It's basically the problem I was facing was I had some downtime on the subway home from work when I was living in New York, but there was no internet, I was tired, and my eyes were closed. Was there any way I could be productive and keep working on this goal even when I had no internet access and I was incredibly tired? So the answer was yes, but how can I do it? And what I came up with, as you can see in the picture there, I recorded some really good mock interviews I had done when I was feeling good, confident about it, and I kept them on a voice recorder. And when I wanted to close my eyes, I didn't have a lot of energy, I would put in my headphones and listen to these mock interviews and follow along mentally, internalize the good answers, and maybe even critique the bad ones and fix them later. So although I wasn't making progress at as fast of a rate as if I were doing an actual mock interview out loud, it was a great way to keep making progress, even when normally I wouldn't think I had energy to do anything. So this was a creative challenge to get things done given my level of energy rather than asking if I even had the energy to do something. So that was what I also found to be very, very successful and kept me working even when I didn't think it could be. And there you have it. This is what the whole system looked like when all was said and done. When I was packing up and leaving for the airport, I took this snapshot. As you can see, there are some Post-it notes I didn't even have time to discuss here. If we have a moment, I could go into it. But basically, everything was filled out. I was able to hit all the milestones. I was able to hit the streak bonus. And I won the variable reward system a couple of times, which was very nice. And this system did a fantastic job of pushing me a lot harder than I think I could have with just raw discipline alone. People sometimes overestimate their abilities to just stay disciplined with using raw willpower. I was pretty pessimistic about that and figured I'd need a system to help push me along. And if it wasn't for the system, I wouldn't be nearly as well prepared as I was when I walked into the interview room. I think I did a pretty good job, and I think Google also thought so because they gave me an offer. So if it wasn't for this system, I probably would not be where I am right now. So I have a lot to thank for gamification and taking the time to learn how to apply it successfully. It's something I'm really passionate about. So if you want to ever talk more about it, here's my information. I live in the Bay Area now, so if you want to grab coffee, we can do that too. But thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for sharing that great experience. I'm sure we all can relate of that stressful and tedious process, right?